It seems like everyone from the internet to TV to radio, anyone in finance says you need to have an emergency fund. And some people take it a step further and they give you tips and tricks and things like that and how to get there. But today I want to be talking about everything that you need to know about emergency funds. We're going to be going over how to get one set up, how much should be in your emergency fund. We're going to be talking about that. And we're even going to be talking about all of the different ways that you can start saving some money and putting money back every month towards your emergency fund and build it up. Truthfully, an emergency fund is a great way to empower your financial life. It's a great way to start actually building financial security, right? You don't have to worry about investing. You don't have to worry about doing anything like that. I am going to talk about when to switch over to investing because that is important, but you don't have to right away. It's meant to be in a savings account. It's meant to just be at your local bank because truthfully, an emergency fund is, at the end of the day, for an emergency. And we're going to talk about when you should pull it out later in this video. First and foremost though, what exactly is an emergency fund? Well, as I said, it's for an emergency and it's for if you have something happen that was unexpected, right? Let's say you go get in your car and you rear end someone, right? Let's say your deductible is $1,000. You need to cover the deductible and your insurance is going to take care of the rest. That's why you have insurance, but you need that $1,000. That's where an emergency fund can come in. It can come up and say, hey, here's the $1,000 you need for this deductible, and you don't have to go into debt for it. You don't have to put it on a credit card. You don't have to do anything other than pull it out of the bank. That's it. Now, it stings. It should sting, by the way, when you have to touch your emergency fund. That's why you never want to touch it, right? But you can instead of going into debt. On top of that, an emergency fund can help if you have a job loss. For example, so many people were laid off. Millions of people were laid off during the coronavirus pandemic. And luckily, in the United States, the government stepped up. They increased unemployment. They helped as much as they could. But in truth, having an emergency fund gives you a sense of security, knowing that if you're laid off, if your job does disappear for whatever reason, you have X amount of months, so much of your living expenses set back to be able to dive into if you need to, should you lose your job. Obviously, you hope you never lose your job. Obviously, that's what we all hope, but unfortunately, that's not realistic. From time to time, that's gonna happen, and when it does, having something to fall back on provides you a sense of financial security that is truthfully much, much bigger than you would even think. On top of all of that, emergency funds help you stay out of debt. If you have a $1,000 expense that you're not expecting, you have to pay it. There's no way around it. It's, you need your car to get repaired because you got to go to work. You can't make any money if you don't go to work, so you got to get your car repaired. Suddenly, if you don't have that emergency fund, putting that $1,000 on a credit card becomes very, very appealing. Or even going and getting a personal loan or even worse, a payday loan to be able to pay for that expense. Whereas if you had an emergency fund, you could pull it out of there and then you're paying it back. You still got to rebuild that emergency fund. But instead of paying it back to a credit card company with interest, you're paying it back to yourself. And that's why emergency funds are so important. Truthfully, in my opinion, it's one of the first steps of getting out of debt, getting your emergency fund set up. Because if you have an emergency fund to fall back on, it's very, very easy to stop going into credit card debt. So how big should your emergency fund even be? Well, everyone says 3 to 6 months of expenses. And that's very true. In truth, though, I would say be cautious. Go for 6 months if you can. It may take you a few years to get there, but if you can get 6 months of your living expenses saved up, there is so much financial security in that. I actually, being self-employed and all of that, and if you're self-employed, this is what I recommend for you as well, shoot for 12 months of your living expenses saved back. Because that way, if for whatever reason something happens to your business, you have the option to get a job or even rebuild a business. Like we have been able to build businesses in less than 12 months. And have them relatively successful. So if you say we're to lose business one, you could build up another business in 12 months before that emergency fund runs out. So that's why for self-employed, up to 12 months, but definitely at least 3 months of your expenses set back. Now, what counts as an expense? In truth, everything. You should have some idea of how much money you spend every month. Even if you don't track it with something like Mint, you should have some sort of an idea. But if you don't, that's a good step. Go and break out a spreadsheet or just write everything out, whatever you want to do, of everything you spent last month. So let's say it's September, go see everything you spent in August. And then see how much money that was. Then maybe add 10% on top of that, and there you go. That can be a good number to have at least 3 months of that number, whatever it is, saved up. Now, on the baseline, at least save 3 months of your rent, any debt obligations you have. That's going to be things like a mortgage, a car payment, any personal loan payments you may have, any student loan payments you may have. So have at least your rent/mortgage and any other debt obligations saved up for 3 months, bare minimum, right? You should also have money in there for food and for gas and for other living expenses. But if you have just debt obligations and rent saved up, you're going to be very financially secure. You're going to feel good about yourself if you have those saved up for 3 or better yet, even 6 months. Because if you get 6 months of those things, you've got at least 3 months of probably all your total living expenses. So while I know that's very general and the general guide is 3 to 6 months of expenses, that's what it counts as expenses. You should have 3 to 6 months of all your expenses. That means even splurging, right? Sure, if you're in a situation where you've lost your job, you're gonna pull back. You're not gonna go to the mall, or you might cut your Netflix account, you might cut your cable. You're going to look for saving money as well. But if you have 3 months of your max, this is what I'm spending on the high end every month saved back, and maybe even, like I said, add a 10% on top of that, you are definitely going to be okay when you lose your job and you're like, okay, I'm going to cut all these expenses. Then you might be able to stretch that 3-month emergency fund to 4, or that 6-month emergency fund to 7 or 8. Just depends on how much you can cut. But that is why we recommend all of your living expenses saved up into your emergency fund, not just like the big ones, right? But at the very least, you should have 3 months of any debt obligations and your rent saved back. Because that's what you're going to be stressing about most when you're in like a crisis situation. Things like food, things like that can actually be relatively cheap. You can just live off rice and beans if you need to. You can get huge things of rice and beans. No one wants to talk about it, but it's true. You could do that for very, very cheap and live off of that while you're getting back on your feet, as long as your rent and your debt obligations are paid. Now, to break this down even further, we do have 3 levels of emergency funds. Now, truthfully, there are 4. I would call level 0 kind of the basic, being you have those debt obligations, right? You have your rent saved for 3 months, you have and other debt like mortgage, car payment, personal loan payment, student loan payment, all those debts. You have 3 months in the bank to be able to cover those payments for 3 months, right? That's kind of the bare minimum. But then on top of that, level 1 would actually be having 3 months of full expenses. That's going to be your food expense, your gas expense, your splurging expense. Let's say you go on Amazon shopping sprees. I'm going to do that from time to time. Let's say you were to do that. You are going to have that money back up where you could continue to do that for 3 months, not having a job, and you would be okay. That's level 1 of an emergency fund. Level 2 is 6 months of those expenses. All expenses, including splurging, including everything like that. 6 months of all your total expenses saved up. And then of course, level 3 is 12 months. And again, most people should never really get to 12 months unless you are self-employed. So if you own your own business, having 12 months of expenses, not only personal expenses, but we recommend business expenses set back as well, will provide you so much financial security. If there's an economic downturn, having 12 months to be able to respond to what is going to happen is going to be so crucial and so helpful during that economic downturn. It's very, very easy when things are going good to forget that things can go bad. And so that's why it's so important to sit back, save money, and build nest eggs for the future while things are good, because that way when they turn bad, you're sitting there like a pro, you're got it, and you can easily make it through. So now that you know the 3 levels of emergency funds and how much you should have, how do you save that? Like, okay, Nick, it's cool that you are telling us that we need 6 or 12, 12 months of my expenses saved back? How am I gonna do that? Well, it's pretty simple. Now, we have a video on, making a budget, and we've got a video coming up on saving money in your 20s, but truthfully that would work for everyone. But if you can just save 10% of your income every month, now that might seem like a lot, but if you have it come out automatically, you tell your employer to direct deposit 10% of your income into their savings account, and then the other 90% into your checking account, you won't miss that 10%. We do this, we've done it for years, and it really does add up over time. 10% can mean saving that 3 months of emergency expenses very, very quickly, right? It's not gonna be super fast, right? It's not, but soon enough, you're gonna be like, wow, this is crazy. I can now stop working for a month and I've got the money. I don't have to worry about it. And then on top of that, there's other places that you can start cutting and moving money into savings. For example, if you cut your cable bill, right? Let's say you're paying $300 a month for your cable, internet, TV, right? Let's say you're doing that. If you can cut that bill, $50 a month, take that extra $50 and instead of like being, woohoo, $50 extra, okay, I'm gonna increase my savings amount, $50 a month. I could pay this before, I've been paying it for months without problem. I'm gonna take this extra $50 and put that into my savings account, and that's gonna help you build that emergency fund so much faster and so much quicker. And if you cut your cable bill, by the way, to $250 from $300, it's only going to take you 5 months to be able to get a month of cable bills saved up. It's that quick and that simple, and that's just from that extra $50. That's not including the 10% of your income you're already saving. So that $50 would go on top of that 10% to help build it. You can do this for all sorts of stuff. Any expenses that you cut. Let's say you decide, you've got 7 streaming services, as we all do at this point. Let's say you decide you don't need Disney Plus. You take that $6.99, it's just $6.99, but you take that and you throw it into your emergency fund, and before you know it, you're saving up over and over and over and over again, and you are building money. I mean, $6.99 a month doesn't sound like a lot, but let me do some math. And according to my Apple Watch, that would be $83, over $83 saved in a year from just cutting out Disney Plus and putting that into your savings, right? It's kind of crazy how stuff can compound like that, and that's what you need to be doing. You need to be looking for these different places to save money, but if you just start with that 10% that I was talking about and just have your employer automatically put that into your savings account and then never touch it. Make your savings account / emergency fund at a different bank if you need to. That's something I do. I use Marcus for my savings account, and that's literally all Marcus is savings, really. And so that's that. I can't touch it. Well, I can, but it's harder for me to touch that money because of that. So yeah, that's something that I would recommend doing. Putting it at a separate bank can really help you from touching it. But when should you touch it? When should you dive into that emergency fund? That's something that so many people think about. Now, we've been talking about loss of income and loss of job a lot, and that is when definitely you should start dipping into that emergency fund. If you lose your income, don't go into debt, dip into your emergency fund and start spending that cash. You can always rebuild it once you're reemployed and once you've got a job again. So immediately start looking for a job, dip into your emergency fund, and hopefully within that time there, before your emergency fund runs out, you found another job and you can rebuild it rather quickly after that. Now, other times would be an unexpected expense that otherwise you would have to go into debt for. So that's going to be something like a car repair, which I've mentioned before, but also unexpected medical expenses, right? Even if you have health insurance, you've got deductibles, $500, $1,000. If that comes up, that's when you dive into that emergency fund and you pay it out of that instead of going into debt, instead of swiping that credit card, getting that personal loan, getting that payday loan. Dip into that emergency fund. And that's one of the biggest things about it. It allows you to stay out of debt and thus not, get behind on bills and things like that. That's where the emergency fund allows you to take control. So those are examples. Any time you lose your income, use your emergency fund, or any time where you have an unexpected expense that otherwise would allow you to go into debt. For example, if it's a $100 expense and hey, you can pay that out of your checking account, yeah, don't touch your emergency fund for that expense. But anything that you would otherwise be swiping your credit card to get out of, that's when the emergency fund comes in, and that's when it's so important. But with that, I think we've covered everything you need to know about emergency funds. It's truly a comprehensive video. We do have an article on our website as well. All of this is covered there, but that goes a little more in depth in the article. So you can check that out in the description down below. But thank you all so much for watching. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to your channel. If there's someone out there who you think might benefit from this, be sure to share it with them. It is a very, very, very important thing to have an emergency fund set up and can truthfully provide you so much financial freedom. So we recommend truly everyone should have one. But nevertheless, thank you so much for watching. Again, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'm Nick, and thanks for watching.